world and control it. And the keyword there is test, because throughout the series there are fights that exist to test your skills and determine if you have what it takes to beat the rest of the game. You'll hear the phrase, if you beat this boss, you can beat this game, a lot, and we call these fights skill checks. Today, I'd like to talk about which Soulsborne boss from each game would be my choice for its definitive skill check. So let's begin with... Demon's Souls is the toughest game to discuss on this list, as the entire world is open from the moment you beat 1-1. You can progress to any of the Archstones at your leisure, though the difficulty does rise based on their respective world numbers. Nobody is going to argue that 4-1 is harder than 2-1. The miners in the Smithing Grounds are nothing compared to the rolling skeletons of Doom in the Shrine of Storms. As such, I'm using this world scaling for the basis of my pick, which would be Flame Lurker. Fought at the end of the Tunnel City, there was a time when the Flame Lurker was considered one of the toughest bosses in the series. But unlike, say, a Man-Eaters from 3-2, where their difficulty stems from atrocious AI, Flame Lurker's difficulty is far more purposeful. He hits hard with impactful slams, and that little punch he does that I find so hard to predict, whilst creating AoEs that you need to avoid. Because most of the game's boss fights are very gimmick-dependent, I think it's only fitting that the boss I consider the game's skill check is one that tests you on the traditional combat Souls is known for. Rolling backwards is the key to avoiding many of Flame Lurker's AoEs, and as long as you keep track of those lava cracks in the arena to avoid fire damage, you'll eventually come out on top. You beat Flame Lurker, and you'll be able to handle the rest of Demon's Souls, which is helped by the fact that the only boss considered harder than our Burning Boy is the final boss in 1-4. Souls, the choice would be Sea and Smoke. They represent the halfway point of the game, encompassing an incredible difficulty spike from facing two bosses at the same time, alongside being your first two-phase boss battle in the game. The rewards for winning are substantial, with the Lord Vessel unlocking the ability to warp, and you officially begin the second half of the game, where you're hunting down Lord Souls from the 4 Lords stationed around Lordran. Is the term Lord starting to lose all meaning for anyone else? However, I'm actually going to suggest a different boss for this spot, one that may seem a little inconsequential for seasoned veterans, but which Gargoyles. This is the actual first gang fight in Dark Souls, asking you to face one fully powered mob, followed by his slightly battered and bruised brother halfway into the fight. The Gargoyles wield halberds that have an incredibly long reach, making it hard to make distance and heal if you take a hit. This is exacerbated by the rooftop arena, which ensures that you can never hunt too far away, lest you tumble over the edge and let gravity take hold. You're encouraged to head to Andre, head to Duke and Pitch, and it's the first boss fight that allows for summoning NPCs such as Selene, as you also recognize the challenge the fight displayed. By the time you reach Ornstein and Smoke, you've likely not fully realized the build has come together, and which will final exam that entering the second part of the game. Meltdowns then are like an entrance exam that ensures you have the baseline definition of the skill check. They guard one of the 2 bells in the game, so they must be surpassed, and they're often fought as the second major boss of Steam and Wave after the tutorial, meaning most players back in the day had to develop the basics of Soulsborne gameplay while learning to fight the Gargoyles. Alongside ONS, it's pretty impressive how they managed to fit 2 skill check fights into one game. Dark Souls 2 has a similar problem to Demon's Souls, in that you are given so much freedom in the game that nobody is going to have the exact same experience. The order in which you fight bosses is ridiculous at the best of times, so figuring which is the skill check here is tough. Anything past Castle Draglayic is out, because by that point in the game you'll be in the 70 to 80 range, which is a bit beyond what we're after for a skill check here. There aren't many bosses on the routes of Walter or Freya, so they're out, which leaves us with the Lion King route and the boss Incinerate. Not really which I'll use for a skill check boss. These on the Lion King route, the only fight that makes sense for this spot is only even for its difficulty and comeback, Also, he's not sure. I'll be having that. Eventually, I settled on the sentinels. Yes, it's another game fight similar to Dark Souls, but it's the only battle outside of the boss herself that is the level of difficulty and complexity to feel like a proper skill check. You start with a single level, one of the three bosses. You can choose to fight them up there, down into the lower arena for more space. However, this also gives the boss the ability to use their moveset. Taking the first moveset on down is fairly simple, but that ignores the other two and forces you to play far more strategically at the top, getting your hits in when you can, dealing downtime between attacks, using your arena to your advantage as best as you can, etc. It's got a little bit of everything. It's the biggest mandatory to mid-game that I always struggle with each time I play. But I know if I can beat the Roman Sentinels, I can handle the rest of this game, no problem. Anytime From Software gets a little freaky with the formula, they end up creating very obvious skill check bosses, and it makes sense. Bloodborne and Sekiro both change up the way you play their respective games and require you to learn a new set of skills very quickly, so their skill check bosses tend to appear very early on. In the case of Bloodborne, it's quite literally the first mandatory boss of the game. Central Yharnam is your homework, Father Gascoigne is your exam. Your first fight against another hunter is one with a lot of thought put into setting you up for success. You need to play aggressively in Bloodborne to survive a lot of its trials, and Gascoigne acts as a mirror to the player to show you what you should be doing when going up against tough foes. Get in close, swing your weapon, and use liberal amounts of quicksilver bullets to fish for those parries. If you're getting absolutely demolished by Gascoigne due to his aggression, the same can also be done in reverse. Peak Gascoigne play results in him being bullied by a skilled player. For me though, it's the attention to detail that Gascoigne uses both a starting weapon and a starting gun that the player could have chosen when they first selected their own weapons. That showcases how well thought out this fight is. You could potentially be seeing Gascoigne using your own build against you, mimicked his style. Then there's the mid-fight twist where he turns into a beast, ranking the threat level up to 11, while asking you to learn a different skill set. Humans are fun, beasts are terrifying, and learning to dodge inwards, fish for attacks, and manage your stamina and health via the rally system is the only way to overcome them. No other fight in this game tests you to the same extent, because this is the only time you'll be learning the ropes of Bloodborne. And this is the only time this video where I'm going to ask you to parry that subscribe button. We're trying to reach 40,000 subscribers, and we're less than 1,500 of the way there. Come on, we can do it. For Dark Souls 3, the linearity of the game means that the difficulty curve is carefully curated. You will always reach specific bosses around a specific level, and it's one of the easiest games in terms of combat to succeed in, so there's not as much need for a skill check boss. Still, I think while some people will point to Pontiff Sullivan, as he acts as a major difficulty spike when you arrive in Irothil, and he definitely challenges you on your skill set in Dark Souls 3, I think I ultimately want to choose the Abyss Watchers. They are your first Lord of Cinder that you have to take down, gatekeeping the catacombs of Carthus and beyond. Their fighting style is a mix of Knight Artorias meets Lady Maria, which are two comparisons that bring to mind an incredibly difficult fight, but that isn't the case. The Abyss Watchers are, in my opinion, a perfect level of difficulty. They're squishy enough where a well-leveled weapon will make their fight a lot easier, but you still need to learn their different combos to have a chance of succeeding. Especially in Phase 2, where a majority of their attacks come with added flames for good measure, which actively adds some difficulty to anyone using a shield build due to the chip damage. Phase 1, meanwhile, is a pseudo gang where you have to deal with 2 Abyss Watchers while the third one helps you out. It eases you into the combat. And most importantly, it teaches you a crucial mechanic of FromSoft boss fights moving forwards. Phase 1 is all about learning a moveset. Phase 2 is all about how that moveset is enhanced, but then your skill at the first phase will allow you to overcome the added pressure that Phase 2 brings. We don't see another two-phase boss fight until the Twin Prince's Lunar, which makes the cinematics and things watches well. This is Dark Souls 3's choke point, and combos perfectly with the world design too, as Baron Peak is one of the toughest areas for new players to get through. A skill check area leading to a skill check boss. Would you guys like me to talk about skill check areas in Soulsborne games? Let me know down below. This video topic was inspired by Sekiro, specifically me seeing the trailer for Sekiro No Defeat, which looks absolutely insane by the way, but also that we saw Genichiro Ashina in all of his animated glory, and I immediately thought about his boss fight, and thus this video was born. Genichiro Ashina popularized the concept of a skill check boss fight in this series, as he was the first where I caught multiple people in the fanbase claiming, if you could beat Genichiro, you could beat Sekiro. This is because he functions as Sekiro's way to weed out those that aren't clicking with the gameplay. You cannot accidentally beat Genichiro. You have to learn how to parry his attacks, handle his combos, stay aggressive, conserve your healing, deal with perilous attacks, and a moveset that changes ever so slightly between phases. If you're spamming attacks on blocks, you're not going to get far, and no boss up to this point truly tests you in the same way. Yobu is fairly easy, especially with firecrackers. Lady Butterfly is weak to shurikens in the air and non-stop attacking. Genichiro, though, stamps on that concept and makes you work for your victory. Not to mention, he has an entirely fresh third phase that sees no way of Tomoe, launching towards you with the speed of a madman and throwing lightning through the air as you learn to reversal it for your needs. If you count each death blow you need as its own phase, you could claim he's a three-phase boss fight that is fought extremely early. No other fights in the mid to late game come close to his challenge, with the exception of the Guardian Aim. You won't face anyone more difficult until the Owl Fathers, Demons of Hatreds, and Ishin Ashinas make their appearances later on. But I firmly believe, again, if you can beat Genichiro, you can beat Sekiro. You will have displayed all the skills you need to, at the very least, succeed at the game's boss fights. Whether you can handle the stealth gameplay of regular levels, though, is a little more up for debate. As for Elden Ring, we have a boss whose narrative literally revolves around the concept of being a skill check. It's another easy choice, but it makes so much sense when you think about a new Elden Ring player and what their instincts would be. Margit the Fell Omen. He appears when you approach Stormveil Castle, the first legacy dungeon you can access. He knows that you're searching for the Elden Ring, that you'll be pillaging great rooms to eventually become Elden Lord, and he's here to stop you. What I find interesting is that Margit doesn't bring his full force to bear. If he wanted to, I'm sure he could go full Morgoth on us, but he doesn't do that. He's testing us, assessing whether we're going to be a danger to the status quo or not. Meanwhile, his actual fight is one of the most complex in the early game, featuring various dynamic combos that catch you off guard, alongside a host of light weaponry that he uses to attack you at both range and up close. He is plausible. Waits later in the game, because he's there to ensure you've got a good grip on Elden Ring. Even with summons, he can be brutal without proper preparation, which is why Margit lands him. He is perfectly designed to scare normal players off, encourage them to explore and brave at their leisure so they can upgrade their build, find new weapons, talismans, equipment, and ultimately fight a few more bosses for experience. He's a skill check that asks you to continue engaging with Elden Ring's movement design. Isn't that amazing? No vision, super outside Stormveil Castle. The player is going to skip exploring an entire legacy dungeon. Come on. This skill check also makes the rematch you stick and lay down far more meaningful, as unlike at the start of the game where you had to squeak out the win with whatever you could muster, in his rematch you are the aggressor, you are the true boss, you are more powerful than anything he can manage. A rare reverse skill check, as it were. Lastly, Elden Ring Night Rain has a skill check built into the gameplay, and his name is Gladius Beast of Night. Quite simply, Gladius must be defeated for you to face the rest of the boss roster. He, alongside Hailster, is the only mandatory Night Lord required to beat the game, as from Adel onwards to Caligo, you only have to beat 3 Sitch unlocked to reach reach the final boss. With Gladius being the first challenge every new player must face, that means he is forced to beat Igrate's skill check. You have to learn how to handle the boss's use mechanics that overwhelm your party, such as Gladius splitting into three, the different dogs going after different players. Sometimes the dogs will aggro onto one player, teaching you about targeted aggro attacks and mechanics. When together, the boss has wide-reaching attacks that make liberal use of the boss arena, including fiery AoEs later on that tell you what type of attacks you should expect from future Night Lords. And you'll likely be resorting to using his weakness to holy damage to stun and negate some of his aggression, teaching you that each Night Lord does have a weakness and you should exploit them for your personal gain. You need to have a solid team to take him down. It doesn't happen by accident. I firmly believe if you beat Gladius, you did something right to achieve that, whether that's by learning how to handle his fight or by optimizing an extremely well-designed run-in limb build to get the right results. And you probably did that with some more relics, which is even more impressive. That's my list. Favorite ring the skill checks I've chosen, let me know down below. Be sure to carry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of my future videos. I recently did an Archipelago randomizer featuring Dark Souls 3, Hollow Knight, and Spyro the Dragon, which was such a fun video to make. Definitely would recommend. Shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. And if you follow me on Twitch, I have a Discord, which you can definitely hear on YouTube. So, see you guys next time. Adios.
Delivered to your doorstep on Instamart.
You go. You feelings?
Maybe it's not just an instinct. It's how I choose to feel on and off screen. 8 hours messages zero in slash color in plus white. Pizza chickens, maybe it's me.
This is one of the most deadly and famous weapons in Elden Ring's history. No amount of nerves can stop this insane weapon. So for a 20% increase to our damage after blood loss, use the Shard of Alexander for a 15% damage increase to our skill Corpse Piler, use the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia or lesser version for an increase in damage to successive attacks, and finally use Millicent's Prosthesis to further increase our damage with successive attacks. Use the Thorny Crag Tier to boost successive attack damage even further, pair this with the Flame Shrouding Crag Tier for a 10% damage boost. Buff with Golden Vow for 15% damage increase, and also use Flame Grounding Strength for a further 20% damage increase. These stats for the build and a full breakdown can be found right here. This is one of the most deadly and famous weapons in Elden Ring's history. No amount of nerves can stop this insane weapon. So get yourself the Rivers of Blood Katana and Gauntlets for a 12% damage increase. And use the Rakshasa Greaves for additional 2% damage increase. Use the Lord of Blood's Exaltation for a 20% increase to our damage after blood loss. Use the Shard of Alexander for a 15% damage increase to our skill Corpse Piler. Use the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia or lesser version for an increase in damage to successive attacks. And finally, use Millicent's Prosthesis to further increase our damage with successive attacks. Use the Thorny Crag Tier to boost successive attack damage even further. Pair this with the Flame Shrouding Crag Tier for a 10% damage boost. Buff with Golden Vow for 15% damage increase, and also use Flame Grounding Strength for a further 20% damage increase. These are stats for the build, and a full breakdown can be found right here. This is one of the most deadly and famous weapons in Elden Ring's history. No amount of nerves can stop this insane weapon. So get yourself the Rivers of Blood Katana and upgrade this fully for maximum bleed damage. Use the Arnsbach Helm, Chest Piece, and Gauntlets for a 12% damage increase. And use the Rakshasa Greaves for additional 2% damage increase. Use the Lord of Blood's Exaltation for a 20% increase to our damage after blood loss. Use the Shard of Alexander for a 15% damage increase to our skill Corpse Piler. Use the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia or lesser version for an increase in damage to successive attacks. And finally, use Millicent's Prosthesis to further increase our damage with successive attacks. Use the Thorny Crag Tier to boost successive attack damage even further. Pair this with the Flame Shrouding Crag Tier for a 10% damage boost. Buff with Golden Vow for 15% damage increase, and also use Flame Grounding Strength for a further 20% damage increase. These are stats for the build, and the full breakdown can be found right here. This is one of the most deadly and famous weapons in Elden Ring's history. No amount of nerves can stop this insane weapon. So get yourself the Rivers of Blood Katana, upgrade this fully for maximum bleed damage. Use the Arnsbach Helm, Chest Piece, and Gauntlets for a 12% damage increase. And use the Rakshasa Greaves for additional 2% damage increase. Use the Lord of Blood's Exaltation for a 20% increase to our damage after blood loss. Use the Shard of Alexander for a 15% damage increase to our skill Corpse Piler. Use the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia or lesser version for increasing damage to successive attacks. And finally, use Millicent's Prosthesis to further increase our damage with successive attacks. Use the Thorny Crag Tier to boost successive attack damage even further. Pair this with the Flame Shrouding Crag Tier for a 10% damage boost. Buff with Golden Vow for 15% damage increase, and also use Flame Grounding Strength for a further 20% damage increase. These are stats for the build, and the full breakdown can be found right here. This is one of the most deadly and famous weapons in Elden Ring's history. No amount of nerves can stop this insane weapon. So get yourself the Rivers of Blood Katana, upgrade this fully for maximum bleed damage. Use the Arnsbach Helm, Chest Piece, and Gauntlets for a 12% damage increase. And use Rakshasa Greaves for additional 2% damage increase. Use the Lord of Blood's Exaltation for a 20% increase to our damage after blood loss. Use the Shard of Alexander for a 15% damage increase to our skill Corpse Piler. Use the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia or lesser version for an increase in damage to successive attacks. Finally, use Millicent's Prosthesis to further increase our damage with successive attacks. Use the Thorny Crag Tier to boost successive attack damage even further. Pair this with the Flame Shrouding Crag Tier for a 10% damage boost. Buff with Golden Vow for 15% damage increase, and also use Flame Grounding Strength for a further 20% damage increase. These are stats for the build, and the full breakdown can be found right here. This is one of the most deadly and famous weapons in Elden Ring's history. No amount of nerves can stop this insane weapon. So get yourself the Rivers of Blood Katana and upgrade this fully for maximum bleed damage. Use the Arnsbach Helm, Chest Piece, and Gauntlets for a 12% damage increase. And use the Rakshasa Greaves for additional 2% damage increase. Use the Lord of Blood's Exaltation for a 20% increase to our damage after blood loss. Use the Shard of Alexander for a 15% damage increase to our skill Corpse Piler. Use the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia or lesser version for an increase in damage to successive attacks. And finally, use Millicent's Prosthesis to further increase our damage with successive attacks. Use the Thorny Crag Tier to boost successive attack damage even further. Pair this with the Flame Shrouding Crag Tier for a 10% damage boost.
Buff with Golden Vow for 50% damage increase, and also use Flame Grumpy Strength for a further 20% damage increase. These are the stats of the build, and the full breakdown can be found right here. This is one of the most deadly and famous weapons in Elden Ring's history. No amount of nerfs can stop this insane weapon. So get yourself the Rings of Blood Katana, upgrade this fully for maximum bleed damage. Use the Arnsbach Helm, Chest Piece, and Gauntlets for a 12% damage increase. And use Rakshasa Greaves for additional 2% damage increase. Use the Blood Exaltation for a 20% increase to our damage after blood loss. Use the Shard of Alexander for a 15% damage increase to our skill. Spoiler. Use the Rock Wings for insignia or lesser versions for increasing damage to successive attacks. And finally, use Millicent's Prosthesis to further increase our damage with successive attacks. Use the Thorny Crag Tier to increase successive attack damage even further. Pair this with the Flame Shrouded Crag Tier for a 10% damage increase. Buff with Golden Vow for 50% damage increase, and also use Flame Grounding Strength for a further 20% damage increase. These are the stats of the build, and the full breakdown can be found right here. This is one of the most deadly and famous weapons in Elden Ring's history. No amount of nerfs can stop this insane weapon. So get yourself the Rings of Blood Katana, upgrade this fully for maximum bleed damage. Use the Arnsbach Helm, Chest Piece, and Gauntlets for a 12% damage increase. And use the Rakshasa Greaves for additional 2% damage increase. Use the Lord of Blood's Exaltation for a 20% increase to blood damage after blood loss. Use the Shard of Alexander for a 15% damage increase to our skill Claws Piler. Use the Rock Wings for insignia or lesser version for increasing damage with successive attacks. Finally, use Millicent's Prosthesis to further increase our damage with successive attacks. Use the Thorny Crag Tier to push successive attack damage even further. Pair this with the Flame Shrouded Crag Tier for a 10% damage boost. Buff with Golden Vow for 50% damage increase, and also use the Flame Shrouded Strength for a further 20% damage boost. These are stats for the build, and the full breakdown can be found right here. This is one of the most deadly and famous weapons in it.
Oh man, this guy is tough. I should probably come back later once I've upgraded my... Sallow. But I'm only level 1! I haven't even upgraded must. Man, this guy is tough. I should probably come back later once I've upgraded my... But I'm all I haven't even upgraded Oh man, this guy is tough. I should probably come back later once I've upgraded my...
Hi, how will like the place? अच्छा है आपकी जगह एक्चुअली खाने में ना मंगाना
I don't take orders. I'm from social media.
Yeah.
Please have a seat here.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Some water.
I don't take orders.
Oh, I'll ask Santa.
Actually, I don't take orders. I'm only for beverages.
to pay.
So much.
Yeah, please, please.
लेके जाऊँ?
हाँ,
हो गया।
मुझे एक ऑर्डर देने का था
वो ऑर्डर मैं नहीं लेता. वो दूसरा है वो.
भेजो ना फिर प्लीज किसी को यार बहुत टाइम हो गया
ऑर्डर लेने का.
अरे भेजो ना यार
हाँ. Definitely try our chole naan prawns. They're really yum.
Yeah.
And give us 5-star reviews, okay?
अरे पर खाने तो दो मेरे को कुछ
Awesome.
मेन्यू नहीं है क्या यहाँ पे
वो मेनू नहीं पता किधर है वो. अगर उसमें स्कैन करोगे ना तो आएगा अलग अलग सैंडविच है और सब. तो मैं खाने का ऑर्डर लेता भी नहीं.
आप क्या कर रहे हो
तंदूर से लगता. मेरे को फ्री टाइम था तो मैं घूम रहा था तो आपने बुला लिया.
अरे यार
तंदूर बंद है.
अरे यार ठीक है थैंक यू भाई साहब हाय
प्लेस
अच्छा है आपकी जगह एक्चुअली खाने में ना मकान
I don't take orders. I'm from social media. Can I get water? I don't take orders. I'll ask Santosh to come in.
Okay, thanks.
Sparkling water, tap water, regular water, mineral water. Regular? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Your regular water?
Yeah, thank खाना होता है भेजो
Actually, I don't take orders. I'm only for beverages.
तो भेज
I'll
भेजो
send someone. Yeah, please. लेके जाओ.
हाँ मुझे एक ऑर्डर देने का था
वो ऑर्डर मैं नहीं लेता. वो दूसरा है.
भेजो ना फिर प्लीज किसी को यार बहुत टाइम हो गया
ऑर्डर देने का.
अरे भेजो ना यार
हाँ. Definitely try our shooting hard balls.
हाँ.
Yeah. And even
अभी आपका अभी
अरे भाई रोटी खिला दोगे आज की डेट में.
पापा हाँ बेटे आपने 30 लड़के देखी 20 लाख रुपए की जॉब लग गई है बहुत अच्छी नहीं है कुछ नहीं होता
पापा बहुत ज्यादा अच्छा लगता है बहुत ज्यादा प्यार करते हो
मुझे पता भी है बात
तो कहते हैं कितना बढ़िया लड़का है पैर टूटा है आपके नहीं पूरे फूट गए
ये मुझे कौन बताएगा ये बताएगी कि तू बताएगी कि भाई
क्या था पहले
वकील तू बन ले बेटे हैं बता बेटी पूरा नाम बता क्या नाम है
पापा क्या नाम है
अच्छा
पापा पर बहुत अच्छा है बहुत अच्छी फैमिली है बहुत ज्यादा टैलेंटेड है बहुत ज्यादा प्यार करता है मम्मी की कितनी इज्जत करता है जब मैं आपको चाहती हूँ ये जैसे प्यार करता है
सबके माँ अब इंतजार में देखिए
बढ़िया है एक बार
क्या बोला है मैंने बता इंटर करके सुनी देना बुला ले
उसकी मम्मी मुझे क्या कपड़े पहनेंगे
कोई दिक्कत नहीं क्या
बेटे के तैयार कोई नहीं है
मुझे तो सबको बतानी पड़ेगी मेरे को कैसे नहीं सर आपको पता है को आई अपनी क्लास एंड सीरियस मोड में क्या बात कर रहे हो 99% सर आपने अपनी बच्चे सभी और 3 दिन तक की वीडियो है मोड में क्या बात कर रहे हो 99.8% सर आपने अपनी बच्चे सभी और 3 दिन तक की वीडियो मजा आ गया था आपको बताइए सबको बतानी पड़ेगी मेरे को कैसे सर आपको पता है को आई अपनी क्लास एंड सीरियस मोड में क्या बात कर रहे हो 99.8% सर आपने अपनी बच्चे सभी और 3 दिन तक की वीडियो मजा आ गया था सीरियसली मोड में क्या बात कर रहे हो 99.8% सर आपने अपनी कोर्स की बच्चे से वॉइस और जेई भी कर
Stop doing that. आज की वीडियो उन लोगों के लिए जिनको दारू पीना पसंद नहीं है जो पीते भी नहीं है बट वाइजर जीरो अल्कोहल वी गॉट दिस फ्रॉम दुबई लेकिन ये तो हमें दुबई में जो जीरो वाली बियर देखी ना मेरा मन बहुत दुखी हुआ करुणा भी जीरो में आ गई है कोरोना इन जीरो this is drought is also zero क्या पूछ इंडिया तो ये for the people जो दारू नहीं पी
हमने हर वो चीज करी जो एक रेस से पहले. Honestly, it's wild how confusing people find it. And I get it.
The world will never be the same. Let me explain. This is Jawahir Sadara. He's a chess superstar from Uzbekistan, and he just won the candidates tournament. Jawahir is going to play Gukesh in the next World Championship match. That means this will be the youngest ever match for the crown. The previous generation, like Kurwana, Giri, Hikaru, and others, will likely soon be replaced by Prague, Iragaisi, Nuremberg, Keimer, Erdomush, Faustino, and more. The question remains, which young star ever defeated Magnus Carlsen? The world will never be the same. Let me explain. This is Jawahir Sadara. He's a chess superstar from Uzbekistan, and he just won the candidates tournament. Jawahir is going to play Gukesh in the next World Championship match. That means this will be the youngest ever match for the crown. The previous generation, like Kurwana, Giri, Hikaru, and others, will likely soon be replaced by Prague, Iragaisi, Nuremberg, Keimer, Erdomush, Faustino, and more. The question remains, which young star ever defeated Magnus Carlsen? The world will never be the same. Let me explain. This is Jawahir Sadara. He's a chess superstar from Uzbekistan, and he just won the candidates tournament. Jawahir is going to play Gukesh in the next World Championship match. That means this will be the youngest ever match for the crown. The previous generation, like Kurwana, Giri, Hikaru, and others, will likely soon be replaced by Prague, Iragaisi, Nuremberg, Keimer, Erdomush, Faustino, and more. But the question remains, which young star ever defeated Magnus Carlsen? The world will never be the same. Let me explain. This is Jawahir Sadara. He's a chess superstar from Uzbekistan, and he just won the candidates tournament. Jawahir is going to play Gukesh in the next World Championship match. That means this will be the youngest ever match for the crown. The previous generation, like Kurwana, Giri, Hikaru, and others, will likely soon be replaced by Prague, Iragaisi, Nuremberg, Keimer, Erdomush, Faustino, and more. The question remains, which young star ever defeated Magnus Carlsen? The world will never be the same. Let me explain. This is Jawahir Sadara. He's a chess superstar from Uzbekistan, and he just won the candidates tournament. Jawahir is gonna...
Sir, ये बच्चा कह रहा है पीसी
from him to see tonight. He moves that fast. Keep up.
आई आज निफ्टी पे तेरा डेल्टा क्या बोल रहा है ब्रो? आजकल इम्प्लाइड वॉलेटिलिटी मूव कर रहा है, मेगा चेक करते जा। अबे थेटा देख, हर दिन कितना प्रीमियम घटा रहा है। तू कुछ भी कर, गामा को इग्नोर मत कर।
ग्रीक्स में लैंड
I'm Billy S, and a few years ago we ranked every final boss in Soulspawn up to that point, but my comments were adamant that I should have included DLC final bosses in that ranking. And while I would like to do that ranking of both final bosses and DLC final bosses together one day, I first want to give those final DLC bosses their own ranking to shine in. So be sure to parry that subscribe button as we're trying to reach 40,000 subscribers and we're so close. Oh my god, we're so close. And let's begin this list with... At number 9, we have Sin, the Slumbering Dragon, final boss of the Crown of the Sunken King. By this placement, I need to stress that all 9 fights in today's video have been extremely high quality. Sin is one of my 5 favorite fights in Dark Souls 2. That tells you how tight this race truly is. Sin is a dragon containing a deadly poison that leaks into the fight as you play. You'll be dodging fireballs, only to find the area struck, coated in a thick, noxious cloud you have to avoid. Sin's melee combos can be deceptively tricky to dodge with the right timing, but it often gives you a lot of openings if you look for them. I faced this boss and no-hit him on Soul Level 1, and once you analyze the moveset, you'll see all those openings laid out before you. Does he spin you or drop to the ground after flying into the sky? Can you react in time to his charge attack that will take you out if you get hit? Are you aiming for his head to get the most damage you can, or are you trying to attack his body instead? Because of Sin's corrosive skin, the head is the only safe spot to attack that doesn't come at the cost of your weapon durability. Otherwise, you'll either need a backup weapon or a cache of repair powder to keep yourself topped up. There's nothing worse than panic venue in which you forgot that you could break your equipment, which can be really annoying, especially in Dark Souls 2, where weapons are about as durable as those you get in modern Zelda games, and it takes me out of the fight a little bit. Not to mention, we've had so many stronger dragon fights throughout the series that feel more elevated than what Sin can currently offer. He's a great fight, but I don't think many will argue that he's near the bottom of this list for a reason. At number 8, we have the Burnt Ivory King, final boss of the Crown of the Ivory King DLC. Fought beneath Elian Lois in the old Chaos Arena, you first have to dispatch his minions who spawn in via the fiery portals throughout the arena. If you choose to save the Lois Knights in the kingdom above, they will come to your aid when facing this boss fight, sacrificing their lives to seal those portals and give you the opportunity to face the Burnt Ivory King without being swarmed. You choose your difficulty for this battle. I really like that mechanic. Although dying can be a bit tedious as you have to face the minions every single time. I've yet to attempt this fight in Soul Level 1, and it's partly why that series hasn't continued on my channel yet. I'm kind of scared to handle this portion. The Burnt Ivory King himself, though, isn't a terribly difficult fight. He starts out as a regular knight with a few extra combos, only becoming deadly when he buffs his sword midway and turns it into a giant lightsaber. Here, his range is increased and he deals a lot more damage, but I found that sticking close to the boss allows you to dodge some of his double swings, and the combo game here remains mostly the same. You might even have one of the knights still alive to help you against the Burnt Ivory King from the start, which neuters the difficulty of the encounter somewhat. He's incredibly manageable as a battle, more known for his memorability and his lore, which is both tragic and iconic. I will never not sing his praises for his boss entrance, WWE could never, but we can't hold the candles for fights higher on this list. At number 7, and this is my big controversial take, we have Promised Consort Radahn, the final boss of Shadow of the Erdtree. Everyone and their mother has talked about this fight to death since the DLC launch a few years ago. We all have our own opinions. Some will defend this battle to the death, believing it to be the perfect capstone for an amazing DLC. Others will call it trash, citing that reusing Radahn felt like a cop-out and wasn't what they were expecting. I fall somewhere in the normal middle of the camp. I find the Promised Consort to be a fun fight, and the time I spent learning his battle made me a much stronger Elden Ring player. His combos have been nerfed since launch to be a lot more manageable, and many of my initial complaints have been addressed. Phase 2, they even released the light show that tries to blind you after every attack, while making some of the more visually striking moments, such as his various clone moves, look more readable for the player. However, I just don't find this fight to be terribly replayable. The level in skill between myself and the Promised Consort is a gulf. And as a player, I've always responded best to boss fights where my own skills are close to those of the boss I'm fighting. Impossible challenges such as Promised Consort or Melania are fun, I do not enjoy them, but they're like a rare wine I sample once a year. They're not fights I can simply jump into and play well. They require so much focus and thought that I end up burning myself out, which is enough to knock this boss down my personal rankings. After all, This is all based on my personal preference. Which of these fights would I, if you ask me, pick up a controller and go after immediately? I think the moveset is fantastic, Phase 1 is extremely fun, and I love learning. Phase 2 builds on Phase 1's foundation and has some fantastic moments built in, like the return to Radon's Meteor, but I genuinely would rather fight the rest of the bosses on this list before stepping toe-to-toe with Promised Consoles. If only it were Mesmer, Midra, or Vale as the final boss of the DLC instead, Shadow the Erdtree would place way higher here as a result. At number 6, we have Sir the final boss of the Crown of the Iron King. Yes, you heard me right. You'd think it would be the Feud Knight King, but no. Beating him is actually a requirement for unlocking Sir Alon's battle. No other DLCs in the series do it this way, but even then, the position on this video remains the same. So, it's a fantastic fight that seems to samurai-like knight and angel to the depth of its memories. Again, that you, the bearer of the curse, are the reason why Sir Alon vanished, sending the Iron King into a full-on spiral, is surrounded storytelling, but it makes a ton of sense. The fight itself sees Alon wasting no time. He has fast strikes and slashes that are designed to be tough to dodge. His grab acts as a temporary buff to his sword, where if he spears you, he'll be able to unleash stronger attacks. And like every cool swordsman, he can shoot energy beams from his blade to attack the player. Although I found this attack not as prevalent in my playstyle. I tend to stick close to Alon, forcing more of his melee combos. As it turns out, Alon is very weak when hit with his right side dodge. You can avoid every one of his attacks with that right directional dodge, which definitely makes the fight a little easier than first thought. As long as you have a weapon that can capitalize on that dodge pattern to deal damage each time, you will come out on top. And if you win without taking damage, you'll even see Sir Alon commit seppuku as penance. I have yet to see this in-game myself, but it's a cool thought to aspire to. If only his runback wasn't one of the worst in the franchise, designed in a lab in the depths of hell itself, he might have actually passed our next entry. At number 5, we have Manus, Father of the Abyss, the final boss of the Artorias of the Abyss DLC. Manus predates everyone else on this list by a wide margin, coming from the very first DLC FromSoft put out, and he's aged like a nice Pinot Grigio. A boss fight that is still intimidating to this day, but it only works so well because of Dark Souls' rigid controls. 4-directional dodges are something I've always struggled with when returning to this original game, as well as the fact that dodging into enemy attacks just doesn't work in Dark Souls. The lessons that future games in the series teach you are mundane. Instead, you have to play a careful, cautious game, especially attacks. If he catches you in his combo, you are done. You're taking it whether you want to or not. His giant hand attacks are very entertaining, and you can see the inspiration for enemies like Bloodborne's Cleric Beast clear as day. What really elevates Manus for me, though, aside from the gorgeous presentation, are his dark spells. Manus has 3 different abilities he can break out: a shotgun blast, an enclosing dark ring, and a shadowy rain. You can avoid all these attacks.
Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we journey through Elden Ring's most hidden quest lines. The stories buried so deep in the lands between that most players finish the game without ever touching them. Characters with full lives and quiet tragedies. Paths you were never told to follow. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight, and what games you want me to cover next. And subscribe. This interesting. He enters pilgrimage into madness, somewhere along the longest ridge of the lake country of Lyria, standing with her back against the sun. There is a line she has her face tilted slightly upward, as if she is straining to perceive something in the air above her, something directional, eyes cannot resolve into a shape. She speaks to you softly. She says she is on a journey, that she is searching for something she calls the distant light. A warmth she can feel pulling at her from somewhere beyond the edge of her senses. She asks, with the careful politeness of someone accustomed to needing things from strangers, if you might happen to have a shabriri grape. What Hieta doesn't know, and what you may not understand at this point either, is the terrible nature of what she is consuming. Shabriri grapes are not fruit. They are the eyes of people who have been touched by the frenzied flame. The ancient cosmic force of chaos and dissolution sleeping beneath the lake, in a chamber so far below the city that even the subterranean shunning grounds are only the beginning of the descent. The armies of the flame-touched carry a residue. The compressed orb functions like a lens. Each eye Hieta consumes brings a distant flame into sharp focus. She is navigating